Chapter 4.
Dead men are behind US.
Along the Black Avenue, back to the prison house of Mordo, the captives were marked. For Alaric, through the friendship Branagh bore him, won from that captain the half of a day for his friends, that they might pass it together before the separation decreed by Belor. Understanding little of what had taken place, and no word of what had been said in the audience chamber of the king, for Alaric the Red was their only interpreter, the prisoners still had the heart to look with curiosity upon the doings in that part of Adla's town which lay along the way that they traversed. As Zena's right trudged, his bright old eyes were busy, and he shook his white head often at the marvels which he saw. A group of the young bloods of Meronica clattered by on horses. As they passed, the old geologist stayed and stopped in his tracks, so that an impatient soldier of the guard hassled him with the butt of a spear.
Gold, gold everywhere.
Muttered Zinez as he started on.
They even shoe their horses with it.
In the hall where they had slept, the friends gathered for council. Alaric had come in with them, and all eyes were turned to him. Before he would speak, the captain insisted that meat and wine should be brought, and he set his helmet on the floor and ate with them. Fate willed that it should be the last time that the 7 friends should sit at the same table. When the meal was ended, Alaric told simply and briefly of the judgment of Belor, holding back nothing. For a moment, silence was his answer. Then Zena's right brought his jaws together with a snap.
What? Me sculling in that barbarian's greasy kitchen.
He barked.
Why not nursemaid to the royal brats?
Then Zenas groaned as his anger was swallowed in the realization of what was to befall the friends he whom had come to love so well. With his topaz eyes ablaze, Polaris sprang up from the table and stood over the captain.
You, Alaric, who call yourself my friend, why did you not interpret this to us while we were in the hall yonder?
He asked quietly.
Then had this kingdom been kingless.
He glanced down at his sinewy hands. Suddenly he bent over and snatched the captain's sword from its sheath. So he, who had seen so much of fighting, made ready to fight again, and for the last time. For what else was left him but to give his life for his lady and go to his appointed place?
Of those who come to take us, some at least shall go a long journey with us,
he said as he toyed with the heavy blade. Iverson and Brooks, picked men who had sailed the seas for Uncle Sam, nodded their heads, saying nothing. There have been traditions in that service of which they were officers. When their time came, they would uphold them. White and straight, the Lady Memine stood up from the table and fixed her glorious eyes upon the Sardanian king. She plucked from the bosom of her gown a small, keen dagger, a blade of Eliam, which a certain card the smith had forged for her in far-away Sardanes. She reached the weapon across the table and into the hands of Minos.
If I understand the words of this man aright, death waiteth,
she said in the ancient Greek of her native land.
Memine prefers it at thy hands, O king of mine. Slay thou me and the unborn king Minos.
Her lips trembled pitifully, and her voice broke. Then she became hard again, and with a fire in her eyes.
Join now then with our good brother here, and slay, and slay, and slay, for this is an evil land. And begin with this man whom we saved from the sea, and who is evil also. See, he smileth while we are about to die.
Alaric, who had made no move when his sword was taken from him, sat quietly, studying the faces about him and smiling his enigmatical smile.
What does the lady say?
He asked of Polaris. Ionis told him. When Rosa Mare heard, she threw her arms about the Sardanian princess and hid her face in Memine's bosom. Presently she looked up, a mist of tears in her grey eyes, but her voice was clear and steady as she said,
If we are to die, let us die together. Polaris, let me go with Memine.
Alaric's smile vanished. He held up his hand.
Let there be no more talk of dying, at least not for many long years,
he said, and there were both feeling and strength in his tones. The others looked at him, wondering what his words portended.
Now the time has come for me to avow myself,
continued the Red Captain.
I will speak all that has been in my mind, and you shall judge if I be worthy of your trust, for trust to me you must, if we are to see a straight way out of this tangle.
He turned to Polaris.
My brother,
he said,
do you recall that yesterday, when you had slain the bull of Shammar, I said to you that Belor would be as little likely to forgive you that deed as to forgive one who confessed himself a follower of the Goddess Glorian of Ruthar?
Polaris nodded.
I remember,
he answered.
But understand not. That is my crime,
said Alaric.
I am of Ruthar, a follower of the Goddess Glorian, and a faithful one. I will make clear to you what you do not understand. Listen. I will make the tale brief. In the long ago, the very long ago, so long that most of the world you know is wilderness and its peoples barbarians, a mighty people flourished on an island in the ocean that you name Atlantic. They called themselves the children of Ad, or Atlas, after the eldest of the 10 kings that once ruled in that land. Tradition has it that their island was the first cradle of civilization, for they, because of their isolation, alone of all the peoples of the earth, dwelt in peace and plenty, and were not wasted by wars. If the ancient maps were truly drawn, the island of Atlas lay opposite and southward from the straits of a fair sea, and the straits were known as the Pillars of Heracles. With time and the growth of the nation of Ad came greed upon her children, greed and the love of conquest. Great navies carried their armies east and west. Along both shores of that blue sea, which you know as Mediterranean, they gained a foothold, and made the nations bend to their yoke. Westward they sailed to another continent across the ocean, conquering the red men of the wildernesses there, and founding provinces and building cities. Then in the flower of her pride and conquest, Atlas was cut down. Both sides of the Mediterranean she held as far as the gates of Egypt and the islands of the Hellenes. But the nation of the Hellenes was the rock on which the fortunes of Atlas went. A wise and crafty king led the Hellenes in battle to withstand the flood of invasion from the island empire. He beat their army and nearly destroyed it. He trapped the mighty navy that had sailed from Atlas against the Hellenes. While Egypt sat quaking, waiting to bend the neck to the heel of the invader, the Hellenes, under their wise leader, turned the tide. Bought and broken, those who had gone forth to conquer returned to their island. But the great sea god whom they worshipped must have been sorely angered at their failure. For in one day he arose and swallowed their island. The land heaved and split, the mountains were rent, and vomited up both fires and waters, and the entire island disappeared into the depths of the sea. East and west on the two continents the barbarians rose against the colonies of Atlas, and they too perished. O'Connell, the slave, who was learned, told me that so utterly was the race of Atlas wiped from the earth that naught remains, excepting the half-buried ruins of some of their cities, which stand in the jungles of the western continent, concerning the very origin of which the minds of men are vague. And of the island of Atlas itself, he told that it was only a dim tradition, a myth, the truth of which is doubted even by the learned. But all of Atlas did not perish. A small part, of the mighty fleet which had sailed against the Hellenes was not lost, but was driven southward in the tidal waves of the inundation which swallowed the island. Afloat, but with every hand in the world turned against them, their colonies crumbling before the wrath of the barbarians, those chiefs of Atlas turned for guidance to the son of one of their princes who was on one of the ships. Of his wisdom that prince told them that since they were hated of all the world, and that even the hand of the sea god was set against them, why, they would sail to the end of the world to find them an abiding place, until in the fullness of time they should once more rule the earth. So they passed like a flame down the coast of the western continent until they reached this place. And here they stopped and stayed, maintaining the old traditions of their race, keeping themselves apart, a hateful people, waiting for the day of which their leader told them, when they shall once more conquer the world. But even in those days they found this land, which is warmed strangely by the ocean currents, was inhabited. A free and fearless race of barbarians dwelt here, and them the warriors of Atlas were never able to subdue. Great beasts dwelt here, also, beasts so mighty that the earth shook when they walked, and the children of Ad found themselves beset by troubles in their new land. But they throve. Though they could not conquer the barbarians, they drove them from the north of the island. And though they could not slay the mighty beasts, they affrighted them with fire, burning whole forests, and forced them also to the south. At one point the land is narrow, scarcely 60 of your English miles across. There the children of Ad builded them a wall so tall and thick that even the beasts might not push it down. On the other side of that wall, the Cimbrian wall, lies Ruthar, a land of forests and hills and rivers, but a fair land. And there dwell the Rutharians and the beasts, and down through all the years to this day there has been war across the wall. Now to the meat of this tale of mine which grows long. In Ruthar there is a prophecy, also, to match that of those who call themselves Meronicans. It is that there shall come up from the sea a mighty man with yellow hair like unto gold, who shall break down the Cimbrian wall and let the beasts pass through, and who shall lead the chiefs of Ruthar in a warfare that shall break the power of Atlas, and cast down the hateful kings and the cruel religion of Shomer. For that man the Rutharian chieftains always wait, and with them waits the Goddess Glorian, who is more than any king or chief.
Alaric paused, and looked long and earnestly into the face of Polaris.
That is my tale, my brother,
he said.
And if you are not the man of the ancient prophecy of Ruthar, at least I believe that you will serve.
Breathlessly Xena's right had followed the course of the Red Captain's words. The scientist could contain himself no longer.
Alatus,
he cried. From face to face about the table he looked with a shadow of awe in his eager eyes.
Just so surely as we are sitting here, if this man tells the truth, and I think that he does, we are among the descendants of the people of the lost continent of Atlantis. Word for word, his story fits in with that which the old Egyptian priest at Sais told us all under Greek, and which Plato recorded. I have read it all in a compilation by Ignatius Dumley, in which he gathered all the evidence which he could find in the world to prove that Atlantis was not a myth.
Zenas sat back with half-closed eyes. A long, low whistle passed his lips.
What do you call the luminous metal with which your helmet and armour are decorated?
He asked of Alaric.
It is called orichalcum,
replied the captain. White nodded.
It is the same,
he said.
Plato wrote that such was the name of a similar metal of which the Atlanteans had the secret. They delved it from the ground. It was far more precious to them than gold. In their temples stood columns of it, on which their laws were carved. O'Connell told me that there were still traditions in the world of the continent that was, but he never told me this.
Alaric said.
You are right. In the temple of Shomer, here in Atlas, such a column stands, and on it the laws are writ. On it, too, is the prophecy of Veronica, against which I now match the prophecy of Ruthar, whose son I am.
He looked at Polaris.
Say, brother, how is it with you? Are you minded to come with me to Ruthar and try a tilt at the Cimbrian wall, a tilt for a kingdom?
Polaris had heard the tale of Oleric with grave and earnest attention, studying the face of the captain as he talked. Now the son of the snows laughed wryly.
Mad talk, Oleric the Red,
He said.
I am not the hero of your prophecy, and if I were, how are we to come from Atlas to this Ruthar of which you tell us so glibly, and when we are come there, if that be possible, how are we to break down the wall which has stood against your armies for years? So it must seem to you.
Interrupted Oleric, with clouding brow.
Mad talk, indeed, and perhaps it is. But here in Atlas is death and slavery. I know a way to Ruthar. For the matter of the wall, I have one question to put. Well answered, all will be well. Here in Veronica there are some few things in which the folk have progressed as far ahead of the rest of the world as the world has outstripped them in most others. Of these are the Phaediums and their power of destruction, the mighty force of which even I know can only be used beneath the sea. On land, that force is powerless except to use as a light. In battle the Veronicans fight as did their forefathers, bearing the arms that you have seen. I know that out in the world men have mastered the secret of engines which slay from afar, casting globes of metal which fly apart with a loud noise, rending all that is near. Such I saw on the ship yonder. We have, as you reckon time, nearly 6 months before the Feast of Years, when doom will be meted out to those who are marked for death. I know that is not time enough, nor do I think we have the means to construct such engines. But say, has no one among you the knowledge to make the stuff which ye feed into them? If there is such a one, why, I know in Ruthar laboratory where he might work, with many willing hands to do his bidding. I have tried it myself, but have discovered nothing. Surely one of you, who are instructed, shall do better. So might we destroy even the Great Wall.
He paused, and gazed hard at Zena's right and then at Lieutenant Everson.
An explosive.
Zena's right almost shouted the words.
You have a brain in that red head, my boy. With the proper chemicals it might be done.
He clapped Everson on the shoulder.
With you to help me, it might be done. What do you think, Lieutenant? I would do most anything to get a chance at this nest of devils,
said Everson, and his eyes glittered.
I have not trusted this man. I do not know that I trust him now. But if he is playing fair, there seems no other way. Whatever you decide to do, I am with you and will do my best. If we can find the chemicals, we can make an explosive powerful enough to move a few tons of stone, if that will do any good. Break you the wall, and I will promise you the rest of the trick.
The captain cried.
Or Ruthar will die to the last man on the road to Atlas.
He considered for a moment.
One man I can surely take with me to Ruthar.
He said.
2 will double, I more than double the risk, and 3 would more than triple it. Still, it may be accomplished. I must have a little time, but I will do my best. Now, my brother, what say you? If I can bring it about so that you and the old man here, Father Zenas, and this other, who, though he trusts me not, I will yet play fair by, if I can manage it that these go with me to Ruthar, will you come also? What of these others?
Polaris asked, and looked at Rosamare.
Here they must stay.
Oleric answered.
'Twill be hard enough to take the 3 of you, and slaying will be done before it is accomplished. It is impossible to take more. By the way which we shall go, no woman might pass undetected. But I tell you they shall come to no harm in your absence. The very law of the land protects them. They be marked for the ceremonies of Shammer. Until the appointed time not even the king himself dare harm them. Bethink you, brother, this is the only way. Yonder on the ship you made a promise, Oleric.
Replied Polaris.
I think you will try to keep it. I trust you. But there are other things to consider.
He addressed himself to Rosamare.
Lady, you have heard this madness, which yet, as says the captain, does seem to be the only road save that to death. In such things oft times the heart of a woman is wiser than the brains of men. Let your heart answer. Shall I go to Ruthar, and with this man and his people fight my way back to Atlas, if it may be done? The future of this company hangs on your word, lady.
Put in Oleric.
And I make another promise. By day and by night I will not leave the side of my brother. If he shall find that in any word I have lied, if he shall meet with any treachery through me, then let him wring this red head from off my shoulders.
If we stay here, we must die today, or be separated and die later.
Rosamare said with a shudder.
And our friends, if they do not die, face a life of slavery.
She looked into the face of Polaris, and though her lips trembled and the tears started to her grey eyes, she said bravely,
Go to Ruthar and come back if you can. If you do not come, I will know that you have done all that a man can do.
I will go with you, Oleric.
Polaris said simply.
Now, what is your plan? This,
answered the captain.
When the guards come, as they will presently, you, my brother, will go with them to the dungeons that lie below this house. Though they are caught in the rock, they are lighted well and are not terrible. You will not fare badly there. The ladies will be courted above here, and I will exert my influence to see that they are treated well. These others will not fare so well, but they are men, and can stand it. Let them do as they are bid without protest. Within 10 days from this day I will plan to have you out of your prison, and will contrive, also, to bring with me Father Zenas and the captain of the ship. By stealth or by force we shall seize a Marzil, pass through the hidden canal from Atlas to the harbour, thence to the sea and down the coast to Ruthar. I shall have some aid, for within the walls of Atlas there is one other man of Ruthar who is faithful to me. You may wonder how it is that I, who am of Ruthar and hate Atlas, yet am a captain in the service of Belar. Years ago I passed the Cimbrian wall, coming as a spy and giving it out that I was the son of Moronican parents taken captive in a foray, that I had been born in Ruthar, but had escaped into my own country. Here I had stayed at the bidding of the Goddess Glorian, ready against the time for which all Ruthar waits. Belar likes men of brains. I have some, and I have risen to be one of his captains. Also, I have learned much. That is all my story.
Who is the Goddess Glorian?
Rosamir asked.
Is she the Queen of Ruthar?
Alaric's eyes widened at the question, but he answered readily enough.
Yes, lady, she is the queen. Ye say that there are great beasts in Ruthar,
said Zena's right.
What are they, elephants? No, they are not what you call elephants,
replied the captain.
O'Connell thought they were until he saw them. Then he gave them another name, which I have forgot. He told me of elephants, but they must be puny beasts compared to those which dwell in the forests of Ruthar. We call them Amalaks. This man is a giant.
He pointed to Minos, who stood 6 feet 8 on his naked feet.
But were he twice as tall, he could not look across the back of an Amalak. But they are shaped like the elephants of which O'Connell told, and, like them, they are tusked. Their bodies are covered with red wool, almost as red as is my own thatch. Elephas primogenes. Mammoths no less,
said Zenas. And he added under his breath,
I will believe that when I see them, my friend.
Low as were his words, Alaric heard them.
You shall see them, Father Zenas,
he said, and laughed. Presently came the guards, and the friends were separated. Some of them were never to be reunited. Deep in the rock below the old palace of Beltisum, where Mordor ruled, the guards led Polaris and left him there. Alaric had spoken truly concerning the place, and the captive might have fared much worse in a modern prison in a civilized land. For the place was roomy and well ventilated, and, above all, it was clean. A chamber, or cell, it was, some 40 feet square by 30 feet in height. Its outer wall was the living rock. On the other 3 sides was masonry. A circular door of bronze, small and of great strength, was its only entrance. Through that door from the corridor without stepped Polaris, and behind him, close as a shadow, padded the huge dog, Rombar, rumbling in his throat so that the guard shrank from him. The door clanged shut, and the bars and wars clashed into place. The guards had neither bound nor chained Polaris. They had not even searched his clothing. The thickness of the dungeon walls was their guarantee that he would do no mischief, and besides, they went well armed. I entered the chamber through mortises in the wall near the ceiling, and above the ground level, where began the foundation of the palace. It was lighted by a single glow, with its enclosed curious battery, Mitzil, the Meronicans called it, but the Americans had decided that the source of the light was some new application of electricity. By the light from the globe Polaris saw that he was not alone in the cell. A small man, whose features were concealed by a mat of unkempt grey hair and a shaggy beard, sat on a low cot in the angle of the wall nearest to the door. He was clothed in rags. This man did not look up when another was thrust in to break his solitude, but bent low over something which he had on the cot, swaying back and forth as he sat, and crooning softly to himself. Polaris cast his fellow prisoner a glance, and then fell to pacing up and down the length of the cell. His mood was gloomy. Above him somewhere through those grey walls dwelt his dear lady, but, how far away. For he was powerless now to comfort her or to aid. Alaric would keep faith. Of that he was sure, but his heart misgave him mightily lest the plans of the captain should go awry. Yes, above him were Rose and Lady Memine, who through the long weeks of their imprisonment, each night when they went to rest, would kneel and pray for his welfare and that of Minos and the others, and that all plans might prevail. Presently the son of the snows sat himself on a second cot on the far side of the chamber, and fell to fondling Rombar and toying with the dog's pointed ears.
Good Rombar,
he said.
Good fellow and comrade.
At his words, the man in the corner sprang up from his cot as though fire had touched him. He shrieked hoarsely and tottered across the floor, moving and clawing at the air with his hands. Unheeding the snarling menace of Rombar, he came on until he stood in front of the cot where Polaris sat holding the dog back by the collar. The man bent over, resting his hands on his knees, and peered into Polaris's face with darkling, rheumy eyes.
English.
He croaked, gasping for his breath.
English. Did I hear an English word, or was I dreaming? Sigh.
He trembled in the terrible eagerness.
You did, indeed,
Polaris said gently.
Now tell me how you came here, who speak it also, and who are you? Go be me, I never I'll pet to hear another English word in this life. Me what's rotten air into my grave.
The man said.
Bor.
He subsided into a tattered heap on the floor of the cell, covered his eyes with his shaking, grimy hands, and sobbed hysterically. Restraining the dog, which was sprung upon the weeping man, Polaris leaned forward and patted the poor fellow on the shoulder.
Who are you and how do you come to be in a Moronican dungeon?
He asked.
Jack Melton's me name, sir.
The man said brokenly.
Him from old London. God bless her. I was cook on the ship Aldine, sir. From Hong Kong to Durban, round the Cape. We got off our course, and the bloody devil's suncus skewered us like a mutton shank, sir, with a streak of light. And W.I. now they did it, sir, is more than I can tell. I floated free on a cask, a biscuit cask, sir. Or mayhap it was in coop I forgot I was that flustered. Hop Bob's a bloomin' big gold ball from the sea, it's Gord's truth. They took me aboard and they brought me ashore. They set me to work in their mines, but I'd not do a stroke for them, sir. I near killed one of the bosses. Then they brought me here, sir. All gore me.
He broke out weeping afresh and rocked himself back and forth.
How long have you been here?
Questioned Polaris.
That I can't tell, sir.
Melton replied.
I used to keep count of the weeks and months, but I lost it. Mayhap half a year, mayhap a year.
Melton fell silent for a time. Then he chuckled to himself and tottered to his feet.
I'll get even with them, sir.
He said.
Never fear, I'll get even. Come and see, sir.
He took Polaris by the hand and led him across the floor to the other cot.
Look,
he said, and fumbled back the ragged covers. Beady black eyes glistened among the rags. A sharp and whiskered grey snout was thrust forth, twitching and sniffing, then another and another. A mother rat and 2 half-grown young ones were hidden in Melton's bed. Out they crept to their master's coaxing, only to scurry back, squeaking, when Romba thrust his head from behind Polaris, whining with eagerness to be at them.
Keep the tight back, sir,
said Melton.
He fright them, this is Henrietta, and there's Bobby and Bill. Henrietta's an old fool, and Bobby's no better, but Bill, he's a winner, sir. Say.
From his breast he took a splinter of wood, to which was attached a bit of frayed red rag, on which he had rudely drawn in black the lines of the Union Jack. He placed one of the young rats on his palm, and laid the sliver with its frayed shred of bunting in front of the little animal. Softly he began to whistle the barzo.
God save the king. Come, Bill, hurry,
he said, and resumed his low whistling. The rat took up the flag in its teeth and sat on its haunches in its master's hand. As long as the whistling continued, the little beast shook its head vigorously, waving the tiny emblem. When Melton ceased the anthem, Bill let fall the flag and swarmed, squeaking, down the man's arm, to nestle away among the rags at his breast.
Gorbly me, Bill, you're a wonner,
Melton said with pride. He placed his strange pet back with the others and pulled the coverlet over them.
Listen, I'll tell you what no man knows.
He whispered to Jonas.
They're half-applied ship. Henrietta and Bobby and Bill is. They carried it to us from a bloomin' junk at Oncon. The captain was dying of it in his cabin when the ship went down, sir, and him a nursing of him along, sir. I saved Henrietta, and she became a mother, sir. When there's enough of them, I shall loose them, sir. That's I'll get even. Gorbly me, I'll kill every beggar in this land with the pledge. Henrietta and Bobby and Bill will do it, sir.
Melton sat down on his cot again and crooned to himself over his pets. He seemed to forget the presence of Jonas. Neither then or after did he ask Polaris any questions as to how he came to share his prison. Polaris drew away from him and went back to his own side of the cell. He saw that the man was mad. Twice each day one of Mordor's guards brought the captives their meals, bread and meat and water in generous measure, enough for the men and the dog. Melton from his rations fed his whiskered family. With his pocket knife and a bit of wood from the frame of his cot, the son of the snows made shift to keep track of the passing of the days, cutting a neck and a wood for each.
God send that there be not many before the coming of old Eric.
He prayed fervently. One night he was startled from his sleep by an uproar in the chamber. Melton's cursing and shrieking was intermingled with the angry snarls of Rombar. Polaris sprang up and threw off the cloth with which he was wont to darken the midst of globe when he slept. Melton was crouched in the middle of the cell. His face was livid and contorted. Tears of rage were on his cheeks, and his breath was coming in gasps. His lips were writhed away from his ragged teeth. In front of him, tense and ready to spring, was Rombar. On the floor, where it had dropped from the dog's jaws, lay a little bundle of grey fur, still twitching feebly. Before the impending grapple, Polaris banded between them and jerked the dog back by the collar.
What is it?
He cried.
What ails you, Melton?
Then Jonas saw the maimed little fragment of life on the floor, and his face saddened.
For Gord, he's murdered my Henrietta.
Howled Melton.
The text murdered her, I say. And how kill him, I will, and you too, if you tries to stop me. And you too, High says.
He staggered toward Jonas and lunged out with his right hand. Something glistened in the light as he struck. Polaris avoided the blow and caught and wrenched the outstretched arm. A slender bar of iron fell tinkling to the floor. Jonas picked it up. Where it had come from he did not know, but Melton, by patient rubbing against the stones of the wall, had ground it to a needle point.
Let me hit him.
The crazed man shrieked.
Hile to him with me bare hands.
Polaris pushed him back.
I am sorry, very sorry, for what he has done.
He said.
But he is my good friend, and I shall not let him come to harm. He did but follow the instincts of his nature.
Melton stared at him for a moment, and then, weeping and cursing, retired to his cot. Far into the night Polaris heard him moaning and mumbling to himself, and pitied him. Jonas hid the weapon under his own pillow. Then with strips of his bedding he wove a stout cord, and thereafter, when he slept, he tied Rombar fast to a leg of the bed. Days passed away, 10 days, 11, 12, and still another. And yet there was no sign of Alaric. Polaris' stout heart sank. In the dark hours of the 14th day he awoke. He heard the grating of bronze hinges. At the side of his bed, Rombar growled softly. Polaris snatched the hood from the light. The door of bronze was open. The mitzel ray shone on the tall form of a man in golden armour. Alaric had come,
I am late at my tryst,
whispered the red captain.
but I could not manage it sooner. Now we must haste, or 'twill be too late forever.
He grinned.
I see your beard has grown somewhat.
He said.
Perchance those bristles shall serve well. You are an ill man to disguise. Who is here?
He asked as he caught sight for the first time of Melton, who had not awakened.
A procreate English sailor.
Polaris answered. He crossed the chamber, with Rombar at his heels, for he had stopped to undo the rope.
What? The brute too?
Groaned Alaric.
I fear we must.
Polaris said.
If I leave him, he will rouse the prison with his howling, and I will not slay him. He has been too good a friend. Can we not manage to take him? I bring him.
Grumbled the captain.
First fetch yonder light.
Jonas took down the globe. As he swung it toward Alaric, he saw that the hands of the captain were splashed red with blood. Alaric noted his glance.
Dead men are behind us.
He said.
Thrice tonight have I used my sword, once at the mines, where I got a versen, and twice above. 2 of the men of Mordor will turn no more prison keys. Come.
He stepped cautiously out through the door. Polaris glanced across to where the mad Cockney lay, breathing heavily.
Some day, if it be given me, I will open this door again and set you free, John Melton.
He whispered. He stooped and went out through the doorway, and Rombar followed. Outside the door of the dungeon chamber, Polaris stumbled over the form of a tall man in armour, who lay with his face to the floor.
More death?
Jonas asked of Alaric, who busied himself with the bolts of the bronze door.
Not so.
Said the captain with a chuckle, as he shot the last bar home in its socket.
Only the death that good wines bring. He has the best part of 7 bottles in his skin.
He looked up at Polaris apologetically.
Delar would flay him for this night's work, did he find him.
He said.
He say the dog has been a good friend to you. Well, this man Mordor, with all his glum ways, is a good fellow. I will not leave my old drinking companion to the mercy of Belar.
Without answer, Polaris handed the light to Alaric, and stooped and swung the limp figure of Mordor to his shoulder. Alaric glanced at the keys in his hand and then at the door.
I'll not turn the locks.
He said.
I would not have the poor slave within starve while they made new keys.
He led the way along the corridor, past a broad stone stairway, to the south wall of the old palace, where it fronted on the black avenue called Jeddah's Flight. There in the wall were other doors of bronze. Alaric paused before one of them.
Will I ever enter Mordor's wine cellars again, I wonder?
He said. He found the key and opened the heavy door. Within, the light disclosed rack after rack, seemingly without end, of dust-covered flagons. They threaded their way among them until Alaric found what he sought. In the stone floor of the chamber in a far corner was a round trap-door of bronze. The captain had to tug one of the wine racks to one side to disclose it.
Lay Mordor down, comrade, and help.
He said, when his utmost strength had failed to stir the door. Polaris, still balancing his burden on his shoulder, bent down and caught the ancient ring of the door in one hand. Before Alaric could lay hold to help him, he straightened, the mighty muscles of his back cracking with the effort. The door was open. The trap yawned on a dark stairway leading down through the rock. Far below sounded the plashing of waters.
Mind where you set your feet,
Warned Alaric as he started down.
Where are Versin and the old man?
Asked Polaris.
They wait us below in the hidden canal, then one other.
Replied the captain.
They entered by another way, while I was busied in the house of Mordor.
Alaric closed the trap and left the keys on the stair-top. Down fully 70 steps they went, and stood on a wharf of stone at the edge of a narrow canal that had been cut in the rock. Overhead, the roof was arched and vaulted. At the lip of the wharf was moored a small marizel, the golden plates of which caught the rays of the lamp like fire.
All the way from the Temple of the Sun to the harbour of Atlas this canal leads cut through the rock underneath Jedda's flight,
said Alaric. He stepped on the rear deck of the little craft and struck softly on its door, which was opened at once. A short man of middle age came onto the deck. He was clothed in the garb of a sailor. As the light fell on him, Polaris saw that his hair was almost as red as that of Alaric.
Now here is another good man of Ruthar,
said the captain. And to the man he said,
Erk, this is the man whereof I have told you.
From head to foot, Erk gave the son of the snows a long and searching glance. Then he folded his arms on his breast and bowed low. With Mordo on his shoulder, Polaris stepped onto the deck and through the door, followed by Rombar. Alaric closed the double doors of the craft, and Erk, who was skilled about the engines, at once got her under way. Submerged and showing no light, they crept cautiously down the canal toward the sea. In the cabin of the Marizel were Verson and Wright, though Polaris had to look twice and then again to recognize the geologist. Zenas wore the mean black of a servant in the king's kitchens. His white hair had been bobbed and his beard shaved from him, but his little black eyes were as bright and restless as ever, and his voice was hearty as he wrung the hand of Polaris and said, Lordy, son, but it's good to see you. Verson, who had discarded the dirty garments of a delver in the earth for the full golden armour of a Moronican captain, caught Polaris's hand as Zenas relinquished it.
Our work has begun,
he said.
And begun well. I shall distrust this man no more.
He pointed to Alaric.
He has kept his promise in blood. He released me tonight, and he killed a man to do it.
As they neared the harbour, Alaric explained that they would be forced to leave the Marizel in the canal and cross the open court of the harbour to the wharves.
Else we must undergo inspection by the guards at the mouth of the canal,
he said.
There is a gate there, and no Marizel may pass without inspection. My lucky star was that Maid Bellar named me captain of the port in Atlas dead. But even I could not pass you through the guards. Their eyes are keen, and one of us at least is a marked man in Atlas.
He glanced at Polaris.
There be too many of them to slay,
he added.
I would have fitted you out with a suit of mail, brother, but there is none in Moronic of a size to cover those shoulders of yours, unless it be that of Bellar, which I could not well borrow. When we leave this craft, what then, Alaric?
Polaris asked.
I have another waiting at the end of the southern quay,
replied Alaric.
Erk knows the harbour as he knows the palm of his hand. Once through the outer channel, then down the coast to Ruthar.
They left the Marizel moored in the canal and went up through a passage in a rock to where a door led into the great arched tunnel above, which at Er's flight ended at the harbour of Adlas town. Now there was only the crossing of the wharf and all would be well. But hark! As Alaric laid his hand on the door of the passage, came the thunder of hoofs through the tunnel, and a steel rider on a white horse flashed past and clattered across the court to the warehouses. He rode furiously, and as he neared the quays he cried out. Alaric tore the door open.
Our work behind there is overtaking us,
he cried.
We must run for it.
Polaris shifted Mordo's weight from his shoulder to his arms and bounded across the pavement to the heels of the captain. Behind came Wright, Verson, and Alaric's Rutharian henchman. Romba leaped at the side of Polaris. Lights flashed ahead of them as they ran. When they neared the south quay, they saw that the way to it was barred by a thin line of men in steel, among whom glittered the golden armour of the captain of the canal guard. Casting a glance over his shoulder as he ran, to note the disposal of his own party, Alaric drew his sword and charged the line. The guard captain leaped out to meet him, shield up and sword aloft. Him Alaric cut down with a single stroke, laughing as he struck. In another instant Averson's blade was out and busy. His cutlass exercises at Old Annapolis stood him well. The line of steel gave. The other 3 fugitives, running together, dashed through and gained the quay. But behind them came many men. Polaris laid Mordo on the wharf and looked about him for a weapon. The door of the nearest warehouse was made fast with a bar of bronze or steel, nearly 8 feet in length. Jonas tore it from its rusts. At the end of the quay he saw the Marizel of Alaric riding in its moorings, and saw that Dirk had clambered aboard it and was making all ready to cast off. Whirling his ponderous weapon, which was a weight to tax the strength of an ordinary man to lift from the ground, Polaris rushed into the thick of the press, where the Red Captain and the naval lieutenant fought side by side.
Get you to the boat,
he shouted.
When all is ready, whistle that I may know.
Clang! The metal bar fell, and 3 men in steel went down under its sweep. With the agility of a panther, the son of the snows leaped and struck again. At his side Black Rombar raged like a demon. Before those terrible blows no man, however well begirt in steel, could stand and live. The Maronican fighting men drew back, aghast. The way to the wharf was clear. Laughing aloud, Alaric drew out of the fight and ran along the wharf to the Marizel. Everson paused at the side of Polaris.
Best go on.
Giannis told him.
I shall need no aid. Or if you stay, stand to one side a bit. I have need for much room.
Once more the Maronican men at arms closed in. Polaris, with his bar, charged them, shouting, for his blood was up. They should take him back to no dungeon when his freedom beckoned so near. 2 more armoured men fell, the mail cracking like eggshell under the clanging flail that opposed them. Another went down under the murderous jaws of Rombar, who fought at his master's thigh. Loud and clear then sounded the whistle of Alaric. Hurling the bar in the faces of the bewildered men of the guard, the son of the Snows ran to the end of the wharf and sprang to the deck of the Marizel. Everson entered the door just ahead of him. Alaric and Urk already had stood Mordo within the vessel and cut loose the mooring ropes. As he paused for an instant on the rear deck to call the great Dolp to him, Polaris saw a giant figure come from one of the stone warehouses and run out to the end of the next quay. In the dusk, and at that distance, he yet was able to recognize Minos.
It is I, Polaris.
Iona shouted.
We leave for Ruthar if we may win through. Farewell for a space until we come again.
Back came the deep voice of the king in answer.
Bear thee well, my brother.
He cried in the ancient Greek of Sardanes.
May the high god guide thy footsteps.
Many a time in after years did the son of the Snows recall to mind that scene, the great, circular basin of the harbour of Adles, dim under the light from the stars, the glittering fair demons that were riding at anchor, the twinkling of missile globes along the wharves, where men ran to and fro, the court and its huge black archway, the armoured men of the guard coming on across the wharf, and the tall form of the Sardanian king standing at the end of the quay and waving farewell. Reinforcements had come to the Maronican guards, and they rushed the quay. But Dirk had his engine going. The Marizel shot out into the harbour. In a moment more the little craft had dived beneath the surface. Like an arrow, it clove through the underwater. Crafty steersman was Urk. Through the harbour he drove the Marizel in safety, and through the tunnel to the sea, meeting no incoming danger. Once out of the channel, he turned the nose of the craft southward, down the coast toward Ruthar. Miles away, amid the dim Rutharian forests, fierce-eyed men gripped their sword hilts firmer and prayed to their stars and their goddess for the safe making of the journey and the glory of the war that was to come. For word had come to Ruthar, over the Cimbrian wall it had come, that Alaric the Red had turned his face toward home again, bringing with him the man for whom a nation waited.